What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and welcome back to the From Computer to Cardboard series, where we are currently looking at taking one of my favorite video games, Against the Storm, and turning it into a board game. In the previous episodes, we looked at all the things that made Against the Storm unique, and we put together what mechanics we really wanted to put into the game, and then kind of started to get a loose, pretty loose idea of how we really wanted things to be and what the core game loop is going to be like. For this episode, we are going to be looking at the first look at actually building cards and what building a good enough looking prototype is going to be like. Normally, when making a prototype, you can kind of just scribble paper on cards and it's kind of good enough for people to communicate and understand what's happening. I like to have a little bit more than that and a little bit more that communicates to player exactly what's going on. So let's take a look. First thing and most obvious thing is that the starting canvas size is going to be 825 pixels by 1125 pixels. This is kind of like the standard poker card size, and I use it for pretty much everything whenever I'm using cards in games. And stuff like the Game Crafter will accept this size when you are making poker cards. So it's pretty easy to start. Just going to start there, right? Next is when I actually played the game last, I took a whole bunch of screenshots of the different menus in the game. And a lot of them have these big elaborate frames around them as like kind of the menus and stuff that you're interacting with. And the goal is to take that framed menu and kind of photo bash it a little bit and adjust it so it's going to fit and work for what we want. Fit as our card frame and border. Now, a lot of this is not very gracious. A lot of it is kind of me just kind of moving it around and duplicating stuff and putting things in just so it kind of works. But the idea is that it's not perfect. I don't need to get it to be exactly what it is. And if in theory I was actually working with the creators of Against the Storm, they would have these kind of assets available for me or whatever graphic designer I have working on the project to actually just come and build the thing. So I would not need to be doing these methods. But for the series, and sometimes when I'm working on games like this, I will take things and photo bash a little bit to make it kind of like a good enough thing. So it's communicating to the player what my vision of the final product is to be. Instead of something like more fast and loose, it's a bit scribbly, where a lot of the player's feedback is going to be how the game looks. I am not interested in feedback on how the game looks because I know that it will look terrible in those scenarios. For this, I'm trying to curate a vibe more specifically and try and kind of lean into what Against the Storm has with its visual identity, because I do think it has a very strong visual identity with a lot of the ways it's kind of ornate. It's kind of carved. Like a lot of the borders feel carved from like maybe like a deer antler or something like that. We can kind of see it has this like level of ornate to it. So kind of the main thing that we're starting out with is just getting the outermost border together using that same kind of starting menu that I've got the screenshot of. And the goal is to just have it look okay. And then we'll come and add stuff to it later, change it or whatever. But trying to get it perfect is kind of a fool's errand. Anyway, I'm not that skilled, right? What you're seeing here is probably the height of my abilities. And looking at the game itself does give us a lot of opportunity for ideas for how things should be laid out. This card in particular that we're working on is the order cards, and as we had kind of talked about in the previous episode, the order cards will kind of be dealt out and you'll be choosing between them, and they're kind of your short-term and long-term goals basically, and it's going to denote a single good that you need to deliver in order for the order to be fulfilled. That's kind of how it works in the game normally. And so this is not like a super crucial thing. It's not a card you're interacting with constantly. It's kind of just a reference there on the table for you. But because it needs to be randomized, it needs to be a card instead of a board. And so that's why we're doing a card. And so there is actually a menu in the game for when an order is selected and is actually not the one that I'm using for the screenshot for this, which I think is fine. We are going to pull it up in a little bit and steal some of the elements from that. But I really like stuff like this kind of grassy, mossy texture that it has going on. So I'm kind of using that as like a backing for everything. And kind of my cheat sheet for this is I'll just clone a whole bunch of layers, put a whole bunch of stuff on there, and then use, I think it's called the clone stamp. And the clone stamp kind of copies an area, and you can use it to paint with that copied area over a lot of things. Basically, I'll just use that to smooth a lot of edges and kind of adjust some stuff enough so that there's a pattern built and I can just paint over the whole thing. It will still look a little bit janky if you're staring directly at it, but because these are cards, and cards are only like smaller than this, my hands are really big, small, a lot of these super fine details aren't really going to be noticed anyway, and some of the stuff we're going to be putting things on top of it anyway. So I don't think it's too essential to get too hung up on, kind of exactly how it's going to look, but I want to make it feel like some effort has been put into it. And I guess part of this series is if I can communicate some of the skills and the process of what I'm doing onto you, that's kind of the idea. We're not actually designing a finished, perfect, polished product because we kind of can't. We don't have the rights to be making an Against the Storm game. This is entirely a thought experiment, right? And so this is just what I would do if I had some of these tools available. I often will go and look at places like itch.io because there will be actually open license trading card game templates that will have some elements and stuff. You can go, ooh, this kind of works nicely, or I can kind of steal this and put it together. And I think that works kind of nicely. You can kind of go, ooh, this is the theme that I'm playing with. This is kind of what I want. Or you can switch it up and go, okay, actually, no, I just like this border and I'm going to steal it and use it for this. One of my previous games, Spaceship Reader, actually does use one of these borders from itch.io. It's like a spacey kind of themed one, and it came in a Photoshop package that had all of the different layers separate. So I could kind of pick and choose exactly which elements that I wanted to put onto the thing. That's kind of the same way that I'm going with this, right? Like I'm building out the flat bottommost layer of the card, and then later I'm going to come and put different elements on top of it based on whatever I'm going to need for that card to do. But for pretty much every single card that I'm going to be using, I can use this same green backed, nice bordered kind of identity for everything, right? It doesn't really matter. But here we actually have a screenshot of the choose and order screen. There's a few important pieces to it. There's this weird mask bird motif thing at the top, which I thought was really cool, so I'll steal that. We have the choose and order text, so might as well take that as well because you are choosing order. But there's also this cool quote part by like a crow envoy, the Queen's envoy, and so we might as well take that and put that on there as well. I have a hunch that it might be too small to read good, in which case I might, if there's a final version ever, I would just maybe remove it or adjust it kind of a bit. There's a little bit of play where I can stretch it and make it a little bit bigger, but it's hard to tell. I think it is going to be a little bit small, but it's whatever. It's flash. It's fluff. That's right. It's fluff. It's about looking good. And so I'm kind of just going and adjusting it and tidying it up a little bit so it doesn't clash too much with what's underneath, so that I can just go and place it on top and have some of these nice little adornments, because I like it to look a little bit pretty. I like a game that puts time and effort into its appearance, because I'm an art appreciator. And I spend probably too much time working on this kind of stuff to make my games look good where I can. And then most of the time, I'm passing it off to an actual professional to come and work on stuff and make it a lot better than what I could do, right? With stuff like this, the choose and order title, I can literally just use the magic wand tool, remove the background, and just have the text there and put that there, and that's fine. With the bird, I wanted to keep the whole black background thing, but I think that's a little bit too hard. So I ended up just kind of cutting it down just to being that kind of like ivory colored, just bird motif thing, which will sit at the top. And because the top is relatively empty, there isn't like a nameplate. Very often on card templates, you have like a nameplate, which is like a specific empty section. I don't have anything on hand that I could show off, but there's like a specific empty section where the name of the card goes. And because specific with the order cards, they don't need to be named. It's not like wine delivery, please. It's just, this is an order card, and then the symbol on it of the order that needs to be delivered is going to be the thing that kind of is what matters, right? So I don't think it's kind of important. We can have this cool bird thing up the top and then have all the information kind of focused in the bottom 2/3 instead, which I think works fine. So I've kind of got all these different flashy elements done, and we're just kind of tidying up the text a little bit. And then I'm going to go and grab my next screenshot, which has the actual order screen on it. We're going to pick out our kind of first template for what the actual button looks like in the game, which you'll see in a second. I'm just kind of basking in the glow. So to clarify, I recorded the entire Photoshop part of it without me talking about it, so that I could just kind of focus on what I was doing and doing. Because I was thinking about doing it as like I make lots of different components for the game in one go, and then run it as like a time-lapse thing where it's like really, really fast. But I felt like some of the value in that was going to be lost, and that maybe me kind of going through step by step and explaining some stuff might be a little bit better. So I'm actually just kind of watching the footage while I'm talking about it. So some of it's going to be a little bit jank, but it's kind of as good as it gets. So you can see the actual order screen here again, where I'm going to pick out what the button is going to be, and the button's just going to sit on top of the card. And so there's some kind of main things here. There's literally a button on it that says pick, that is for clicking on, right? And I've left that in there, but it's not essential. It's something that could probably go. There is an icon of a wax seal, which is the reputation with the crown icon. This is probably something that can be replicated in some of the other components, because like the actual in-game graph chart, or whatever that tracks your reputation, has like a big ball at one end with the symbol on it, and then like a track that runs along it and shows you how much completion percentage you have, and then like the queen's impatience is on the other end, like a skull or something, which is like your lose condition. So playing them apart from each other is going to kind of show you your distance from victory or from loss. I think it's fine. We'll make a separate component, which is going to be that board probably, and then that logo or icon, I'm not sure what you want to call it, that icon will try and match in as many places as we can. We're trying to use the existing assets of the game to communicate the parts of the game as much as we can across the whole thing. And so here I've drawn a really nice smiley face, but the whole point is I'm removing the actual elements from the screenshot, and I'm just kind of painting in a shitty texture with the same clone tool to just make a background that's just going to be that kind of scroll texture, and then I can put the things on it that I need on top at the end. And again, because this is all so small on a card, that a little bit of scuff is not going to be noticed that much. So I'm just trying to clean it up a little bit, make it look like a scroll as much as possible. Just kind of, doing an okay job. And also not realizing that I didn't do a good enough job erasing the top layer. So there's a little bit of me clicking on the same thing, trying to solve a problem. It's the middle of the night. It's currently 3 a.m. at time of recording, when I'm most productive, I guess. But I'm not always the most alert. But sometimes when I have the motivation to make cool projects like this. And look, if you're also a big video game enjoyer and a big board game enjoyer, let me know what kind of computer games you wish would show up in a board game adaptation, because that's kind of the point of the series. It's trying to talk about what kind of things, what kind of skills are needed for that entire transitionary process. And Photoshop skills are not necessarily a requirement. This is usually like amongst the first few things that I recommend for people to actually hire someone to do. Some things I've just told myself so I can do stuff like this, make an okay looking prototype. but I can't illustrate, so I will always hire an illustrator. But I'll do some Photoshop stuff for like the first few stages of a prototype where it's not really make or break. And then for the final thing, I'll use the shitty version that I've created as a reference for the actual final graphic designer to look through, see the ideas and stuff that I had, what components I used, thought was important, and then build that together, which is slightly better than making a brief, which is like me scribbling circles where I want circles and numbers and what boxes are supposed to fit everywhere. It's kind of jank. At least this communicates a bit better, the overall color schemes, layouts, and stuff like that. So now that we've got our scroll fixed, we are picking up the good. For this particular card, I've just selected wine. We're going to talk about what good in particular we are going to need to satisfy this order. And just putting the wine jug on there, it has like this black box, which is like the background for the icon, and it's a bit ugly. It doesn't fit very nicely, so I've just stolen one of the empty boxes from one of the other screens that we took a screenshot of. I'm just going to use that box instead. It's again not super pretty, but like it kind of does the job enough, right? And so that means that when we're adding other goods, we just replace the wine, we just paste over the top of the wine whatever the other good is, because the size is kind of always going to be similar. And then I can just go, okay, this one's not wine, this one's actually wood, or this one's actually mushrooms, and we put them up over the top of the thing, and we make out all the different orders, and then all we have to worry about is adjusting the quantity for every single one. And I think that's pretty fine. It means I can make pretty much every single order card that I need without having to go and do too much extra steps, right? I don't need to go and build this whole thing from scratch. All of them are just going to be, iterations of what is this wine delivery card. So all I need to change is the number of things required and then the icon of the thing that is required, which is not that difficult. But I didn't want to just put any old box there for the extra number, because there is actually one on the order sheet. So I kind of stole one to use for that. It is very small from the original screenshot, so the resolution is going to be very low, and again it's going to look a little bit janky, but I think it's fine. When you kind of zoom out, it doesn't look that bad. But this is basically like the last thing needed, and then we kind of zoom out, and that's what it's going to kind of look like. You can sort of see where some of the stuff is if you know what you're looking at, but most of it's really not that obvious. It does actually kind of look okay at the end of it. And this is 15 minutes. Like, you've literally seen me not sped up. Exactly 15 minutes worth of work trying to put together a card for what will be an Against the Storm board game prototype. So look, if that's something you're excited about seeing more of, I might do a whole nother episode with like another specific different component. But then after that, I would just go and build everything. You don't need to see me do every single card in particular. I'm just trying to show you highlighted slices of each different piece of the process, so that when we do get to the end, you kind of understand how we got here along the journey. And I thought that showing some Photoshop was kind of essential, because I spend maybe the most hours in Photoshop when it comes to working on stuff. And so if you do have any Photoshop specific questions, I'm not that good. I'm not the guy to ask. There is a lot of good tutorials that are actually probably going to teach you in 15 minutes more than what I know. What I've learned is because I have a friend who is very good at Photoshop, and he's watched me do stuff, and he's like, please, for the love of God, stop what you are doing. I'm going to teach you this thing, do this instead. And so perhaps you should rely on YouTube to be that friend and help you bridge that skill gap. But I think knowing like a bare minimum of kind of graphic design stuff will be a great start in, because if you make a prototype that looks kind of good, the players that are playing the game are going to be less focused on giving you visual feedback, the thing that they notice most obviously, and like actually focusing on the gameplay experience. And this is like a lesson that I learned. I ran a playtest of a game where the cards were sleeved up, and the players' only feedback given to me was that the sleeves were too pointy. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with anything I've made here or the experience you've just had. I do not control how pointy the sleeves are. I want to know about how fun the game was. And it's the same kind of thing. If you can remove as many obvious grinding points away from the player, they can focus on, I really enjoyed when we hit that final thing. It was like a nice natural climax or whatever. Like, they'll actually give you more relevant feedback And so that's kind of the goal in making it look okay. And it kind of looks okay at the end. Like, I'm pretty happy with this. But look, if you're excited to see what happens next in this series and want, how much closer we're going to get to finally getting it as a prototype to the table, maybe see me do some arts and crafts, get the scissors out, cut up the different cards and sleeve them up and put it together, stick around. Hit that subscribe button that I've put up on the screen. But also, if you missed the episodes at the start, I'll have a playlist of the entire From Computer to Cardboard series where you can go back at the beginning, you can go through me looking at Against the Storm and explaining what makes the game unique, or some of the initial brainstorm kind of content, and check that out and catch up to date. Or if this is not the most recent episode, you can find out what happens next immediately. You can just jump right into the action. But as always, I'll have a random video up on screen for some other cool stuff that we do on the channel, because maybe something there will catch your attention. And stick around, because we'll have a cool board game to show off very soon.